Hello, how are you doing today? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we've got a topic that's crucial for homeownership, the real estate contract. Whether you're a buyer or a seller or even a real estate agent, understanding this document is key. So let's get started. I know contracts can seem a bit overwhelming, but fear not, we're here to break it down for you so you can understand all the important parts of the document. There are many different types of contracts in real estate, including the listing agreement, which is between the seller and the agency, and the buyer's agreement, which is between the buyer and the agency. But today we're going to talk about the real estate contract, which is between the buyers and sellers, also known as the offer. So we'll give you information about this contract, and I always say up front, anytime that I'm going through a contract with a buyer or a seller, or anybody in between, is that this is prepared by Arkansas attorneys. Because of our membership with the Arkansas Realtors Association, we have access to these documents and we can use them, and I just explain them the best I understand and I fill in the blanks. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the real estate contract and all the parts to it. So when you're ready to make an offer, most of the time when you think about making an offer, you're just like, okay, this is the price I want to offer. But a real estate contract has 16 pages and there are 36 paragraphs, including the expiration. So there are many details to a contract and all of them are negotiable. So we're going to go through all the paragraphs. Some of them are going to be quicker than others. Like the first paragraph is parties. That's just your name. Now, oftentimes you think, okay, well, that's just my name. Well, do you want to put your kids on there? If something happens to you, so the deed automatically goes in their name. Is your spouse going to be on there? Because of the loan, you need details from them to be on there. It could be your parents, your kids. There's all kinds of people that could be included in the parties, but usually that's the simple one. Who's going to be making the offer? And then the second paragraph is address and legal description, as well as the type of property. You can have a single family home, you can have a manufactured home, you can have a townhouse, you can have a duplex. So there's many different things there. And then the next part of number 2 is address and legal description. And sometimes this can get complicated too, but usually in Cherokee Village, you're just going to have a number and a street address, and then the legal description is really what you're actually buying is the land, and the house just happens to be on it. So usually that's going to be a lot block and subdivision, and then as well as the city and the county and the state. And we probably would also list in this area what the acreage is also in the paragraph 2. Now paragraph 3 is, like I said, the most important part, the purchase price. And not only does it say the actual amount, but it tells you what type of loan, and this would also be where we would enter owner financing in this paragraph. Now it does also say that the purchase price is contingent on the appraisal coming in for that same value. If you are getting a loan, if you're doing a cash offer, there is going to be no appraisal. So that is something that a buyer would pay for, is an appraisal on a property. So that would be all the things that you're going to check on that, the type of loan, how much you're offering, and then we go into many more details after that. Now the next page, there is specifics about VA and FHA loan. They reiterate again that you understand that the buyer cannot purchase the house for more than the appraisal, and you cannot keep their earnest money if the appraisal doesn't come in. So they do some extra protections for VA and buyers. VA and FHA buyers, not real development, just VA and FHA. Now at the very bottom of this page, they also say that the buyer receives the, for your protection, get a home inspection, which is another piece of paper that we recommend that you sign. It's just basically saying that you understand an appraisal is not a protection for you, it's actually a protection for the lender. It's actually the lender ensuring that they are giving you money on a property that they will be able to get the money back in the end if you foreclose on it and if you stop making payments. The inspection is your protection to make sure that the house is in working order, or at least you have an idea of what you need to repair when you do obtain possession of the house. Even with a VA, an FHA, and RD loan, they do have additional elements for a health and quality and safety inspection as part of the appraisal, but that's still not the detail that you would get with a full appraisal. All they really do with that is make sure that the heat and air is working, that the roof is at least five years good life, less than 5 years old, and that there's no peeling paint, things like that. There's floor covering. It's just real basic stuff. Okay, so that's page 1 and 2. We're moving on to page 3, and that's going to talk about agency. And agency is a really big deal right now As you may be aware that you probably had a real estate agent show you the house that you wanted to make an offer on, and you believe them to be your agent. Well, until you sign something that says that you're their agent, they're actually working for the seller. So there's about 5 different ways to have agency in this contract. Most commonly, it's going to be B. I would say most commonly it's going to be B because that's when your agent represents you, and then there's a listing agent that represents the seller. Now, if you come to me about one of my listings, then it was going to be C, because I currently represent the seller, but you also want me to represent you because I'm actually representing both the buyer and seller. Now, A would be if you came to me and you didn't want me to do a buyer's agency, you're completely comfortable with me not representing you and only representing the seller. Very rarely do we use D and E. E would be like a for sale by owner, maybe there's no representation, or sometimes there's just not a listing agency. But it's very rare that there is no listing firm, and the E would be only really used like for someone that's in our office, that's an agent, and they're not asking the company to represent them or as a buyer or a seller. So those are the different ways. So it's very clear to you who is your agent when you're signing this offer. That's the part that is an important part for you to realize who is working for you and who is not working for you. So we're going on to page 4, and that talks about loan and closing costs. Now, very often with a VA, FHA, RD loan, a buyer will ask a seller to pay their closing costs. And those closing costs, with a VA loan, a seller can pay up to 4% of your closing costs. And with an FHA or an RD loan, they can pay up to 6%. I believe that's correct. You want to check with your lender. And so this would be where you would ask the seller to pay for those closing costs. It does say pre-printed in there that the buyer pays their closing costs and the seller pays their closing costs. Each of you normally have your own. You're going to pay, like the buyer's going to pay for the appraisal, the inspection, all the lender fees, and then the seller's going to be paying the listing agent commission that they agree to, as well as any taxes that are due. They're going to be paying off their mortgage. Each of you will pay deed stamps, which is what Arkansas requires every time a property is sold. You pay taxes on the purchase price, and you split that in half. And if you are getting a loan, the buyer will have to pay for title insurance, and the seller will have to pay for title insurance to sell the property. Now, if you're buying it cash, only the seller pays title insurance. And so those are some of the closing costs that you would be looking at. Now, there is a paragraph in here that you have to put an application in for financing within 5 days of acceptance. So it's highly recommended that you get pre-approved before you make an offer on a house, so you can make sure that you have enough pre-approval to purchase the house, as well as literally being approved. Sometimes you can't because of your debt to income ratio, or you haven't been at work long enough, or there's different things. Maybe you got a loan too recently. There'll be different reasons that you can't get approved, so it's highly encouraged to get pre-approved and pre-qualified. But if you don't, and you're not able to, you do have 5 days after acceptance. So you do not have to be pre-approved before you make an offer. And the next paragraph, number 7, is earnest money. Earnest money is money that you pay with the offer when you make the offer to make your offer earnest. It's money that you pay now versus later. And that money is held either in the listing agent's escrow account, agency's escrow account, or sometimes can be held at the title company. It's not paid to the seller. It's just held with the agency until closing, and then it's applied to your down payment and your closing costs. So it's not additional money to the seller. It just shows, like I said, that you're earnest, that you actually have money to get the ball rolling. Now, the next paragraph after that is a seller deposit, and it says it is non-refundable. That does go directly to the seller. It's not held in escrow, so it's paid directly to the seller. So the only way that you're getting that money back on a non-refundable seller deposit is if the seller can't pass good title. So that's the only reason that you would get that back. So rarely we see that someone would pay or ask for a non-refundable deposit, because there's contingencies in the contract, the inspection and the survey and everything like that, and you would want that deposit back if those contingencies didn't go through. But there are properties that would work for an as-is sale that all you're asking to do is get the title work done. So there are opportunities to do that to show that you're serious about the offer and you're not going to back out. Now we're moving on to page 5, and this talks about conveyance. It talks about that you would get your title by a full warranty deed, and it also talks about mineral and oil rights. Now, just to be completely frank, mineral and oil rights are not always recorded. So all this says is that the seller will convey to you the mineral and oil rights that they have. There could be previous owners that have maintained their mineral and oil rights. More than likely, this isn't going to be an issue. We're not Texas. We don't have a bunch of oil under the ground. We have a high water table. So more than likely, this isn't going to be an issue. Sometimes I've seen where they retain their timber rights. So you do want to make sure that if there is any rights that are recorded, that you are getting those conveyed. And if not, then either you're compensated or you're at least aware of it and it's not an issue to you. And then it does talk about title requirements. There's a couple options here with title. As I mentioned, the seller in Arkansas is usually bound to pay for title insurance. And the title insurance basically does a search for any liens, any mortgages, any credit cards that they might have filed on your credit report, any car loans that maybe somehow are bound to your house, anything that's bound to the house or the property or to your person. Like I said, it could be credit card loans that you have, credit cards that are past due. It's not going to be anything current that has to be paid. But any of those liens have to be cleared before the property can be sold. And they have to have proof that it's released, that the mortgage or whatever is released before they'll pass the deed on to the buyer. So the seller will pay title insurance for the property, but if the buyer is getting a loan, they also have to have title insurance to insure the loan, that the loan stays free and clear throughout the process. So there's a couple options there. Normally we mark A, which is that the seller provides it. You can also split the cost, because sometimes if a buyer is getting an FHA or a VA loan, it's much more expensive. And so they'll ask the seller to split that cost with them, and then there's just a blank for other, and we would use that for owner financing, because usually title insurance isn't given then. It's usually given to a buyer after they've paid in full, and then a warranty deed is transferred. So moving on to page 6, paragraph number 11 is survey. Now I had one instructor tell me that he would get in a survey every time he even bought a sandbox. And there'd be many people that say that if you're buying land, it would make sense if you're getting surveyed to buy a large piece of land. But actually it makes more sense to get a survey on a small piece of land, because only an inch can make a difference when you're getting a small piece of land. Most people around here don't get surveys because they're buying a platted lot. But there are definitely possibilities that the house could be not built inside the lot lines. Again, you're buying the land, and you want to make sure the improvements are on the land that you're buying. So that is why a survey is good. And the reason that a survey is part of the offer is it also ties back into title insurance. And there's a disclosure under here. Should buyer agree to accept the most recent survey provided by a seller, this survey is for informational purposes only, and buyer will not be entitled to the legal benefits of a survey certified in buyer's name. So what that's saying is, if later down the road there's some discrepancy found, and the survey that you had before was old or had been changed since then, the title insurance wouldn't protect you against those legalities when it came to fighting for your land back. So that's the reason to get a new survey, so that it's in your name and you're protected. An old survey will show you where the property lines is and the acreage and the dimensions of the lot, and it will put stakes in the ground. A new survey would put stakes in the ground so you know real life and on a piece of paper where the land is. But there are still plenty of ways you don't have to get a survey, it's just highly recommended, so you know exactly what you're buying in real life on paper and it's on the deed correctly. Now the next paragraph is prorations. Taxes are prorated to the date of sale. And so we are a little bit off in Cherokee Village because we have both county taxes and SID taxes. The county taxes are paid in arrears, so the tax bill that's coming out in March will be for 2023 county taxes. And SID is paid ahead, so it will be 2024 taxes. So when you go to close, you're going to get both a debit and a credit for the date of closing. So if you close on March 1st, you'll get a credit for 2 months of SID taxes, and you'll get a debit for county taxes. I probably said that wrong, but anyway, one's a debit and one's a credit, and it will be clearly stated they'll be separated, and they'll be clearly stated on your statement, so that you're both current on your taxes. And because of that, when you get the bill next year when taxes come out March 1st, then you will owe all of that because the seller's already given you a credit for those taxes. Now, paragraph 13 is fixtures and attached equipment. This would be like your refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, window air conditioner. Now, many of these things are pre-printed in here, so you want to make sure that you read your contract and see what you're getting. Like dishwasher, range, oven, water heater, heating and air conditioning, plumbing, septic, electrical, all of those are pre-printed. So all we would have to write in is things like fridge, washer, dryer, or for example, we get a lot of places that sell all the furniture together in a house. That would be where you would write that in if there was anything that you wanted to keep, like the lawnmower, the couch, the table in the backyard, the fence, anything like that. So just to make sure that you're aware that you have to write that in or you're not going to get that in your contract. It's just because it says it on Zillow that you get the refrigerator does not mean you're going to get it if it's not in the real estate contract. This is the part that you're agreeing to. So you have to make sure that you put in what you want and what you expect to get. This page is about contingencies. So a contingency would be anything like, I always say, do you have a house to sell? Do you have to, if you're buying cash, do you have to cash in your 401k or your retirement plan or some stocks or bonds? Because even though that's cash, you still have to go through the process of cashing that in and getting that to your bank account, and then it will be cash. And as far as if you're selling a house, then we want to, if you're just listed it for sale, then we have to say that you actually close on the property and you sell that, and then it goes into more details about how long that you have to do that, and then even more detail. There's two types of contingencies. There's no escape clause and there is a escape clause. Now the no escape clause, forgive me if I say this wrong, but the no escape clause means it's binding, that you cannot, any offer received after yours would just be considered a backup offer. That it is, your offer is bound to the seller and they can't back out just because they get another offer that's higher and better than yours. Binding without an escape clause, no, I said it wrong. Binding with escape clause is the much lengthier paragraph that has, you have to put in the hours until you'll be notified, as well as the address you can be notified at. Because if they do have an escape clause, then if they get another offer, they can say, hey, we got another offer. You can remove your contingency and move forward and buy the house, or you can terminate and we'll move forward with this other buyer. So it is kind of shaky, but then that gives the seller the opportunity to consider more offers. If it's something small, like you're just going to come and see the property over the weekend, then that would be something that could be bound without an escape clause because you're going to clear that in just a few days, maybe a week or 10 days. But if you're waiting for your house to sell, the seller of the property is probably not going to want to wait and not accept any other offers in case your house takes 6 months to sell. So there is ways to put into an offer that your offer is contingent on your house selling, but then you have to get into a little bit more detail about how serious you are about that offer and the flexibility that you're giving to the seller. So that's a contingency. And then there is an opportunity for you to get a home warranty as part of your offer. You can get a home warranty at any time. You don't have to get it as part of your offer. You can get it any day of the month of the year. You can get a home warranty. But most often we'll see a home warranty in an offer when you're asking a seller to buy it. If you can do a seller or a buyer that pays for the property for the home warranty, and then it has a limit of price and what company is going to use it, so it does get a little more detail in there. Most often, I don't recommend home warranties around here because of how rural we are. It is difficult to get vendors to work with them. They're a great idea, but it just doesn't work very well around here. There are some warranty companies that you can work with that will allow you to hire whoever you want and pay the bill and get reimbursed, but I don't know how well those work either. I'm not familiar enough with them to say that's a great idea. And then paragraph 16, which is usually one of the most important ones as well, is inspection. There's only two options: no inspection, or yes, I'm getting an inspection. The first one, as is, where is, that means it's right there, right now, everything stays the way it was when I saw it, no changes, no repairs. I'm not going to inspect it. So I almost always mark B, even if you don't plan to do an inspection, unless you're 100% sure you're not going to go back to the house, you're not going to have anybody else look at it, an inspector, your brother, your dad, your mom, your sister, anybody, look at the house to make sure that you're going to buy it. I always mark B, so then you have that 10 days to do your due diligence, whether it's a septic inspection, a termite inspection, a mold inspection, any well inspection, anything that you want to look at the property and make sure that everything is going to be okay once you own the property and not have any major repairs that you have to worry about. So I highly encourage you to always get an inspection, as I mentioned earlier. Now we're going on to number 17. So we talked about, I just said that if you mark B, you have 10 business days to do an inspection, any of your due diligence. Now the paragraph right after that says, as I mentioned earlier, that when you do an appraisal, VA, FHA, RD, appraisals have a health and safety inspection. They can ask a seller to make repairs for that house to be up to requirements for those entities. And so that next paragraph, number 17, is third-party requirements, refers to those. Because more than likely, we won't have them in 10 business days. It usually takes a good 3 weeks for an appraisal to be ordered, and we need to have the appraisal back to know if there's any repairs. So this basically says there is no timeline, honestly. It doesn't say that there's a time restriction. It just says that the listing agent or the selling agent and the buyer will get that list to the seller as soon as possible, and so that the seller can respond if they're going to do those repairs or not. But it's not included in that timeline the same as the inspection. So they do outline that just to protect buyers in case they have to get that list of repairs for the lender back to the seller in a timely manner. Now, the next paragraph is going to be a seller property disclosure. There's 4 choices here. Most often we check A because we want the seller to fill out the disclosure. That's a whole nother document. It's 14 pages. It's a bunch of check boxes that said, yes, I did this. No, I didn't that. Yes, I have insurance. No, I didn't make any claims. No, I didn't make a claim and then keep the money. Things like that. And it also talks about utilities and who you use for trash service, and if you had the homestead exemption, and if you had your taxes locked in for 65 and older. Just as many details as you can think of about the property to be able to answer a lot of buyers' questions. So we almost always ask for that. A reason that you wouldn't get that is if it's an investor that owns that property and they've never lived in that property. But just because they didn't live there doesn't necessarily they don't know anything about the property. If we do get an investor that fills it out, probably everything's just going to say no and it's not going to have any details. But it doesn't hurt to ask. The other 2 options are that I've already seen it and I've signed it, but there's other parts. There's 3 or 4 parts to it that you have to sign throughout the offer process until closing. So that's the other option. And then there's also, I know you filled one out, but I don't want it, and then I just don't want it. And so that would be probably what you're doing if it's an as-is condition, investor profit, vacant, maybe it's in probate, maybe it's inherited, those would be situations where you're probably not going to get one because they literally don't know anything about the property if they're the kids that have even been to the house. And then paragraph 19 is termite control requirements. In Arkansas, I would highly recommend that you get a termite contract. We are a very humid environment. We are very wet, and insects like wet. And so it is very likely, I've had properties before that have had termites and had to be treated for them and repaired. So there's 3 options on termite contract. 1, you can say, no, I'm good, I don't need a termite. The second option most often is a letter of clearance. A letter of clearance means the termite company will go out, inspect the property, make sure that there is no active termites, there's no damage from termites, and they will say, okay, this is how much it will cost for me to treat the property. They will give that information to the title company, and when you go to close, then the termite company will get paid, and after closing, then they will go out and treat the property. So that's a letter of clearance that is required by FHA, VA, RD. All those companies are going to require those entities will require a new letter of clearance. Even if it's been treated before, they will require a new treatment. And then the last option is just a C that you can just put as other. And usually we put in there that you transfer. Like if you already have a contract and it's a cash sale or a conventional loan, you don't need a new letter of clearance. You'll just transfer the current contract. It's already been treated. They'll inspect it again to make sure nothing's changed, but they basically just change it over to your name, and then you have the termite contract, not the seller. Paragraph 20 is lead-based paint. Now we do have another addendum that goes along with the contract, again, is the lead-based paint addendum, and that just says that the seller has no reports and has no knowledge of lead-based paint in the home. Anything built before 1978 has the possibility of lead-based paint. So more than likely in our area, we're going to be marking B, that you need to be aware it is a possibility, and more than likely somewhere in that house has lead-based paint. If it's built newer than 1978, well, then we'll say A. To our knowledge, there's nothing on the property built before 1978. That's a big EPA requirement. And then number 21 is insurance. There's not really a place, you don't check a box or anything. It's more of a disclosure to a buyer that you do have 10 days to contact your insurance company and make sure that the property can be insured. It doesn't say that you would want to make sure that you can afford it, but that would definitely be something that is important to do to make sure that for some reason it's not high. Like maybe there is a whole bunch of claims on the house, or maybe that for some reason you have a high insurance score and the insurance is just not affordable on that house. So that is something that you want to do during your due diligence period, is check with your insurance company, see how much it is, make sure it's not in floodplain. And I also recommend that you ask for a Clute report, because a seller can provide you a Clute report. They're the only one that can do so, and that Clute report will tell you of any claims that a seller in the past has made. So even if they told you they didn't make a claim and keep the money on repairing the roof and never repaired the roof, that Clute report will tell you that, so that you can get insurance once you close. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't find that out until you close. So that is why you want to get the Clute report. Or to paragraph 22, which is the closing date. Used to be you could put on or before the closing date, and they've changed that now to a specific date. It has to be that date so that everyone agrees that it is that date and that's the date you're closing, unless you both agree to a different date. So you want to make sure that's a day during the week, and make sure that that's a day that you can come to closing. You don't have to be at closing. Most of our buyers and sellers don't actually come to closing. So that is the closing date, but everyone agrees to that. And after closing date, then we go to page 13, which is possession. And there's 3 options there: upon closing, delayed possession, or early possession. And we almost always put A. We highly discourage B or C for both the buyer and seller, because they can be liability issues. Oftentimes the seller will want a few days after closing to get their stuff out. I'm not saying that's wrong, but it could be an insurance problem. I've had people that do delayed possession and then they go to move in and the house is trashed because they didn't clean up after they're moving, and they didn't get to do a walkthrough because the seller was still in the house. Early occupancy, what if the buyer finds out they can't get the loan? Now they've moved into the house, they're living there, you got to figure out how to get them out. So there's issues with both of those. So I highly encourage you to do it at closing, but there are going to be some exceptions to the rule. Now most of the other stuff in the rest of the contract is just legal terms. One of them is assignment. It means that you can't assign this contract to another person. We would just write it up in a general addendum and change the name. So that's not that big a deal, but it's saying that only this person on this offer is the person that's buying this. And so the seller would have to agree that it's assigned to another person. It also talks about risk of loss. My example always is, if a tornado comes along and knocks down the house, you're not obligated to purchase it. If a fire comes and burns down the house, you're not obligated to purchase it. You can, if you want to. If you want to go ahead and purchase it, you can, but you're not obligated to. You can terminate or renegotiate terms. And then it just says that we're in Arkansas time. And severability just means that you change other paragraphs in the contract. It doesn't negate the rest of the contract. And merger clause, it just talks about putting different documents together. So like when I send this offer to the agent, most likely I'm going to email it, and so he's going to send me back a different one that he had his customer sign, and I'm still going to have the original. It's just saying that those are all part of the same contract. And again, buyer beware. This paragraph is 29 in big bold letters. They made sure to make it bigger print than anything else. Is buyer beware, get an inspection. That's what all that is about. Now we do have a small paragraph 30. They don't like to give us too many lines, because then we are practicing law if we add things to the contract. But this would be maybe if you didn't have enough room to put all the furnishings, maybe you had to say something here. I might say that if I was going to do an inspection and say, oh, but the buyer isn't going to ask for repairs, they just want to know what's wrong with the house, something like that. Or maybe you also have a clause that the buyer didn't see the house and they want to make the seller aware that they're buying it sight unseen. So those are the kinds of things that you would put in another paragraph. And 31 is time. That basically says time is of the essence, and we realize that this has a time date on it. It has a time that the buyer signed it, and it has an expiration. So we know that time is of the essence, and we all need to take care of everything as quickly as we can. And the second to last page is paragraph 32. It's attorney fees. I can't charge you a fee to fill out this form because I'm a real estate agent. I'm not practicing as an attorney. So I can't charge you a fee to fill out this form. And it just talks about tax reporting issues, and then we get down to licensee disclosure. There's about 3 options here. Most often it's going to be A, that the person signing, either the buyer or seller, one of the people that are signing this offer, have a real estate license. Because if you have a real estate license, you're more educated about real estate and negotiations and what the value of a property is. So you want to have to make that aware to the other party that you are. So either you are not, you are, or maybe you're an entity, like I'm an LLC. So my LLC, I'm a representative of that, so I'm a real estate agent. Or if you have a trust and you're a real estate agent, then you would mark C because that you're an entity of that trust. And then the last paragraph is paragraph 36, and that is an expiration. Like I said, everything as part of the contract has a date to it, and so it is important that we sign our documents as quickly as possible and stay in touch with our real estate agents so that we can get answers to everybody throughout the process. And the very last page is mostly just signatures. There is a little bit of small writing at the top. It just reiterates what I said, that this has been prepared by an Arkansas attorney, and you can take, I always say it to every buyer before they sign it, every seller, you can take this to an attorney, get it reviewed, and make sure it's acceptable to you and to your attorney. But I can't change any of the pre-printed words. I can only fill in the blanks, and I explain it to you the best I understand. Now there is a serial number on every single page of the real estate contract. I can't go in and make any changes to the real estate contract without you knowing that, because that real estate contract number is going to change every time. So if you say you want to offer $100,000, I turn around and have you sign the offer, and I go back in and change it to $150,000. I can't do that with that serial number changing, and I'm giving you a copy right now so you know exactly what you made an offer of. And the very last little line right there says, I am licensed by the Real Estate Commission, and if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, then you can report me to them. They added that recently for protection of the parties. And then it just has the signature places for buyer and seller and all the agents and everything like that. And then of course place a date. Now at the very bottom would be where a seller would reject or counter an offer with initials. So if you've made it this far, you're probably ready to make an offer, because that's a lot of details. So the real estate contract is 16 pages. Every part of that real estate contract is up for negotiation. So just make sure that you understand the offer that you want to make, and that you talk to your real estate agent about any questions you have about making an offer or the terms that you want to negotiate. And there you have it, a crash course on the real estate contract. Knowledge is power in the real estate world, and understanding the ins and outs of these contracts is a game changer. If you found today's video helpful, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more valuable content. I also did this video about buyer's agency agreement, where I don't get into the details of the contract, but why it's important for you to have a contract with your real estate agent so they're protecting your interests. Until next time, happy house hunting, selling, or investing. Have a blessed day.